These questions a little behind.
There you are. Hello, hello. Are we still connecting to?
We have a video.
There you go. Now you got sound, right? Roger.
Yeah, I have sound. Jim
Yeah.
O'Kelly,
Hi,
Yeah.
Roger.
how we doing?
I'm doing all right.
Good.
Gee, I thought I'd introduce you to.
Well, we know each other.
You think? Okay, well, let's go ahead and start, even though everybody's not here, I'm sure. This was a real popular choice of the people that we had coming out. So again, we appreciate you coming, and I'm going to shut up, so go for it.
Okay. I'm happy to answer questions, talk about whatever you want me to talk about, but if you're going to leave it in my hands, I'm going to share my screen if that's okay, and just use a PowerPoint as sort of a, okay. I will do that then.
Jim, you also shared with me that a lot of the stuff you're going to share today, people wouldn't find on the, ENF website.
That's correct. So, Roger might have seen some of this stuff before, but for most of you all, it'll be new. So let me just start it up. All right, how's that? Everybody see it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Looks good.
All right, well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. Roger said he wanted to get me out to Washington. This isn't what I had in mind, but here we go. I do want to say that, we were talking earlier about one of the silver linings of the pandemic is my commute is a lot shorter. Of course, when I commute to the living room, but also when I commute to the office. Also, I've been saving a ton of money in dry cleaning and shaving cream. So I know that you've had Rick Gathen recently. My good friend Rick Gathen did one of these, and I'm sure he had a lot of razzle dazzle for you. He puts on a good presentation, but I'm guessing that he didn't give you guys the secret recipe for growing membership, because I have that secret recipe. I'm gonna share that with you right now. All you have to do is you have to increase the number of members we initiate and or decrease the number we drop for non-payment, and that mathematically, this is just math, will equal a slowdown or reversal of membership decline. So of course the secret recipe doesn't have like a silver bullet solution for how to do those things, but this is a helpful lens, and we try to use it as a secondary lens for everything that we do at the foundation. We try to, when we're talking about our programs, we try to look and see, well, is this going to move these arrows in the right direction for us? And if they aren't, are there ways that we can tweak the programs to do that? So, of course, I'm here to talk about the foundation, not membership, but, the foundation can help with membership, and there are 5 ways that we do that. One is that by spending more on Elks programs. By investing more in Elks communities, by turning Elks scholars into champions of the order, through fundraising. And I have a slide that I'll show you in a little bit that will show how fundraising can correlate to membership. And then finally, by sharing the stories of our good work. The Elks are doing fantastic things across the country. And we can't continue to be the best kept secret in our communities. We have to let people know what we're doing. And we try to help in sharing those stories.
Jim is in Lee's office. It's all started.
So, those 5 things are really all about trying to raise the Elks profile. We want, when you all are out in the community talking about the Elks, we want people to know what you're talking about. And we want you to have good things to talk about. And so our approach is, we've increased our spending dramatically. We've invested in our community investments program to provide lodges with more resources to serve their communities. And those two things should equal greater Elks visibility, so that when you're out trying to recruit members, people know what you're talking about. They equate the Elks with that organization that has the backpack program at the school, or that does the fishing derby, or whatever it is that you're doing in your community. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm not going to get too into this slide here, but just, you know, how the foundation works. We are blessed to have a pretty large endowment fund that right now is around $700 million. It all started with a $100,000 donation from Grand Lodge in 1928. And then over the years, we've received for our endowment fund around $270 million in donations from Elks voluntarily. And those donations have grown. We have our investments are overseen by our board of directors, our trustees. Roger's one of them. We have an investment consultant we work with who advises us. And we have our money is invested in 10 different asset classes. And we have 13 managers in those 10 classes. And you can see what the targets are in this on this table here and what the ranges are. And we're constantly looking at that and opportunities to rebalance the fund and trying to stay on those targets there. We have a spending formula that we've been using since 2009. It's what's called a total return spending formula. And we take the average market value of our endowment fund over 12 quarters ending December 31st. We multiply that by 5%, and that gives us what we call our spendable dollars. That's the lion's share of what we budget each year, comes from that formula. And this looks at going back to the FY's fiscal year, so fiscal year 2009, that'd be the 2008-09 lodge year, to the current fiscal year. On this chart, you can see what the fund was valued at, and then what our spendable dollars were. And the key takeaway here is that over this period, our spending has more than doubled. You know, in 09 fiscal year, our budget, our fund yielded $16.1 million for our budget. And this current year, it's $33.3 million. I highlighted 2010, and you can look there that the fund value declined that year by more than 10%, but spendable dollars went up. The reason is that's the year that our new spending policy kicked in that year. Now, does anybody want to tell us what was happening that year? Like why? Yeah, it was 2010, 2009, 10. Why did the fund decline in value that year? Does anybody know what was going on? It was the recession after the subprime mortgage crisis. Had we not made the change at that time to our total return policy, then our spendable dollars would have declined that year. And this is at a time when need is at its greatest, when it's like now, right? That's when there are tough times, tough economic times, people are out of work, and that's when they need help from charities the most. And had we not made the change when we did, we would have been looking at, when people needed us most, having less money to spend. Now, it was just good fortune. We had actually been looking at making this change for about 7 years before we did it. And we decided to make the change a year earlier. It just happened to kick in at the right time for us. And then, 2 years later, we increased our spending rate to 5%. We started out with 4%, but there you go. This chart here, the green line is our spending. This is the growth rate, and you can see it's growing by more than 100% over this period. So more than doubled. The blue line is the value of the fund. That's also going up, almost 60% increase in this period. And I don't have risk plotted on here, but good news is that we've been able to increase spending and increase the value of our fund while decreasing risk. So it's truly, as Michael Scott would say, if anybody's a fan of The Office, it's a win-win-win situation.
Wow.
So anyway, for those of you guys who are newer to Zoom, you can move the, if you're seeing the images of us on the side or on top, you can move that around so that it doesn't block portions of the slide. Spendable dollars, what comes from our endowment fund is about 90% of what we budget in revenue. There are a couple other sources, the largest of which is designated gifts. You might have heard us talk about that before. That's when instead of donating to the endowment fund, you're donating to a specific program. You know, you want to support the Hoop Shoe, you want to support scholarships, you want to support drug awareness, whatever that program is. We plan to receive about $2 million in designated gifts each year. That's what we're budgeting for. And then other various sources of revenue account for 1.6 million. But you can see most of it is from that spendable dollars, which is a known number. That's based on that spending formula. And regardless of what happens during this year in the markets, we're going to spend that amount because it's based on what happened in the past. So I've shown you how much we've increased spending, right? That's the good news, but how you increase spending matters, right? Like, you know, as prospective donors to the foundation, hopefully you care about how we're spending that money, right? Now, the Better Business Bureau has a standard for charities, and that standard is that they should spend no more than 35% of their budget on administrative and fundraising expenses. That's the standard. At the Elks National Foundation, we are spending this year less than 7%. Sandy, do you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry, no. I was just, I don't know what I was doing.
Yeah, if anybody has a question, feel free to speak up. I'm happy to slow down or speed up or go off on tangents. So the takeaway here again is like we are investing, we're doing better than what the Better Business Bureau says we should be doing, much better. You know, that spending increase you've seen, most of that is going right to our programs. And this next slide is something we can all jump for joy about. This picture was taken at the Leadership Weekend last year, back when there were more things for us to jump for joy about. Our budget for the current year is $36.1 million just for our programs, and that's 93.7% of the total budget. So this slide here looks at our increased spending on just our programs from 2007 to the current year. And you could see it just kept going up and up and up, right? We're spending a lot more on our programs than we used to. That point A I've marked there in 2010 is when we adopted the total return policy. That helped. And then when we increased the spending rate to 5% from 4% in 2012, that also helped. But you can see that these bars have gone up almost, I think, every year. And of course, we've spent more money every year on programs. So when we talk about what the foundation does, you know, we like to encourage talking about our work in terms of you know, outcomes, what we're doing versus the programs themselves. So, you know, we put resources in the hands of tireless volunteers. We work to end veteran homelessness. We develop Gritty Kids, and we help students realize their academic dreams. That's our work in a nutshell. When you talk about the foundation that way, the next, you know, the obvious question is, how do you do it? And then we can get into the programs. But we think it's more effective to talk about developing Gritty Kids than to start with, we have a free throw contest for kids 8 to 13 years old. You can get there, but what's the point of that contest? The point is it develops grit. So our largest program has become the Community Investments Program. And this year, we've got $14.6 million budgeted for that program. This is a picture from one of Washington's lodges, Port Townsend. It donated its Beacon grant to meal programs at the Kiwanis and the YMCA. And I think they're pictured with somebody from the YMCA's summer meal program. You know, we try to encourage active use of our grant funds for reasons I'll get into in a moment. But we needed to adapt this year. With the pandemic, it's just not, it's not necessarily safe or smart for us to be encouraging Elks to get out there, you know, like they normally would be to serve their community. We needed to change. And so we relaxed our guidelines and made it okay for lodges to simply use their Beacon grant as a donation to another organization that was maybe better equipped to serve directly in this environment. And you know, that's important. That way, for the first couple of months of the pandemic, you know, the Elks were largely on the sidelines, and that's just not a place that we are accustomed to be, right? We are the premier service organization, premier charitable organization, and we've earned that reputation by getting out into the community and doing things. And, you know, in March and April, we couldn't do those things. But we were able to, on April 1st, we were able to start a slow rollout of the community investments program, starting with gratitude grants. And then we introduced other components throughout the year, and lodges were, and we encouraged lodges to use those grants for COVID relief, and a lot did. We've donated so much money to food banks in the past 6 months because there's a lot of people were out of work. There was a lot of food insecurity, and the Elks have made a real impact there thanks to our grants. So it was, I think, encouraging for us, and hopefully it's encouraging for all of you to be able to help your communities at a time when people clearly needed help. This chart looks at the growth of the Community Investments Program, which we call the CIP. Over the course of the year, you can save yourself a lot of time by saying CIP instead of Community Investments Program when you say it as often as we do. So I'm going to call it the CIP. It started in July of 2005 with a very modest budget of $350,000. And back then we had we had two reimbursement grants, a $200 gratitude grant and a $200 promise grant. That was it. And it has grown like 4,000% since then. This year, as I said earlier, $14.6 million. You know, lodges can get, I believe it's something like more than this year, more than $10,000 in just the 3 small grants, or around $10,000 in just the 3 small grants. And then, you know, we're still trying to figure out the impact grant piece of it. But, you know, we've done a very good job of trying to get resources into your hands so you can do big things in your community to raise the profile of the Elks. It's a lot like, the CIP is a lot like a volleyball game, you know, and we're the setters. We are setting you guys up, and sort of up to you to take that money and spike it, you know, and do something big in your communities that's going to get the notice of people, you know, that's going to gain the notice of your members who maybe aren't as active as you guys are, gain the notice of people who would like to be Elks, and gain the notice of people who maybe used to be Elks and maybe want to rejoin an organization that's doing big things in the community. And we can't do that part for you. All we can do is make these funds available and encourage you to use them in ways that are going to help your lodge, in addition to serving the community, which is paramount. Here, why the CIP? You know, why we invested so much in the CIP? Well, we want to help lodges build stronger communities. That's consistent with our mission. You know, we have some really good national programs at the Elks, but you know, if your lodge didn't have a scholarship winner, or wasn't active in the hoop shoot, or maybe wasn't in a community where there are a lot of kids, you maybe weren't benefiting. You didn't see the benefit of some of the other things that we were doing. But every lodge can find some way to use one of our grants to improve the quality of life in their community. We want to help raise the lodge's community profile. That just goes back to the secret recipe. You know, how can we move those numbers? Well, we can try to help you raise your profile by doing good things. We want to energize the existing membership, and again, we want to attract people who want to be a part of an organization that's doing great things. Walla Walla Lodge is an organization doing great things. It donated first aid kits and other essential supplies to the area stand down for homeless veterans, which is pretty cool. So it doesn't take a whole lot to work the CIP. What you need is at least one motivated, enthusiastic volunteer. Now this lodge is a picture of Sitka, Alaska Lodge, and they have 2 motivated, enthusiastic volunteers. They couldn't look more enthusiastic than those 2 guys right there. An idea for a charitable project, a lodge consensus. You know, we don't really want to fund pet projects, because what happens with pet projects is people tend to burn out, or they just they fall into the habit of not telling people what they're doing. I can remember when I first joined the Elks, the lodge secretary was walking around the night we were initiated, and he asked people, like, you know, he asked me, like, how would you like to get involved? And I said, well, you know, I love history, and I think it would be very interesting to work with veterans and, you know, talk to people and hear those stories. And do you know what he told me? Anybody want to take a guess?
I don't know.
He said, we already have somebody who does that. Now,
Oh,
I was working for the Elks already at the time, so that didn't, you know, daunt me, right? I stuck with it. But if I hadn't, you know, if I hadn't been invested in the Elks, I might not have come back, you know, give them the lodge a second try. You know, we want the lodge to know what's going on and be invested in the project. And then an action plan, and then go to work. You know, make sure you're identifying a need in the community, something that's relevant, something that's important, and then you have a plan for what you can do about it. Key performance indicators. We're trying to develop more of these things in our business. They're called KPIs, but they're basically their metrics, how we can evaluate how we're doing. And these are 4 from the 2020 grant year, which ended March 31st. The first is the value to our partners per $1,000 granted, and that value was more than $2,600. And the reason for that is because we encourage active grant projects, and our grants come with volunteers attached, comes with you guys attached to them. For every $1,000 we granted last year, we put 9 elk volunteers in the field, and those 9 volunteers performed 64 hours of volunteer service. And there's a value to them, right? So what we're saying here, what these numbers are saying is that you volunteers, elk volunteers, more than double the impact of the grant money that we're spending. And then this is also pretty cool. One of the questions we ask in our final report forms is, you know, whether the lodge gained any membership from its CIP participation. And we also asked how many. But this is just telling it that 46.4% of the lodges that received at least one CIP grant last year reported that they gained a member from it, at least one member. So that's pretty cool.
that's big.
There are tons of resources. If, you know, typically the people who come out and listen to these sorts of things, I'm already preaching to the choir. But if you're new to the CIP, you would like to learn more, we have tons of information online on our website, elks.org/CIP. Normally we produce a field guide every year, which we mail to the lodges. We mail a couple copies to the lodges, and we make a copy of that available online. This was such a weird year that instead we've got these toolkits for the Gratitude Grant, Spotlight Grant, and the Beacon Grant. And if you go to elks.org/CIP, and there's a menu there, and you choose CIP resources, and you can take a look at the resources there, and you check out those toolkits. There's just all sorts of tips and ideas, ways that you can use those grants to serve your community in the time of COVID. So obviously the CIP isn't the only thing that we do. We also fund the Hoop Shoot program. As I said, we developed Grit. I like this picture here. This is actually, again, happier days. This is from the 2019 national finals, when we could actually slap hands and stand in a line like that without masks on. Every Hall of Fame career begins with dedicated volunteers. You know, like I don't care who you are, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Michael Jordan. You started out probably in some sort of rec league, or maybe playing for a school team or whatever, that relied on volunteer coaches. And you know, that's who we are. That's, you know, the Elks are. Maybe we're not coaching teams, but that's sort of the role we play with our youth programs. The Hoop Shoot program, as I said, we've been trying to talk about it in terms of developing grit, which has become a buzzword in the field of education, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, when a researcher named, I forget her name, so I'm not going to say what it is, but she concluded that that grit was the best indicator of future success. It was better than IQ. It was better better than grades. It's better than any other thing that you can imagine that you think would predict somebody's future success. None of them compared to grit. And so educators were looking for programs that develop grit because it was such a buzzword. And that's what this program does. That's exactly what the Hoop Shoot does. Now, how do you develop grit? Well, you develop grit by setting goals, by working hard to achieve those goals, by failing, and then by bouncing back to do it again. The Hoop Shoot, it's not the act of standing at a free throw line to shoot 25 shots that develops the grit. It's the work that the kids put in to prepare for our tournament so that they can do well. They set their own goals. They decide how many shots they want, how often a week they want to go to the gym, how many hours they want to shoot, how many shots in a row before they leave the gym, whatever it is. And then they work hard to achieve those goals. And they can see themselves getting better. So even if it doesn't translate into success in the tournament necessarily, because you can only control your performance, you can't control the other kids' performances, but they still see themselves getting better because they put work in. And even the youngest kids, even the 8 and 9-year-olds, understand that if I work harder at something, I'm going to get better. So now that math test I have next week, if I actually study for it, I can do better, etc. Right? And it also helps that the Hoop Shoot is a fun activity. So kids are learning grit, they're developing grit, and they're learning these valuable life lessons while having fun. Maybe it's a different story if they had to learn it while rolling a rock up the hill or something. They're not. They're having fun in the gym shooting baskets with friends or family members. As Elks, we can be supportive. We can encourage people to come back when they fail. And that's the formula that's worked for us for nearly 50 years. We'll be celebrating our 50th anniversary of the Hoop Shoot in 2022. So, we're excited about that. We signed a housing agreement last week, and we're looking at a venue for that event. And we have one in mind that we think is going to be fabulous. And that'll be in Chicago in 2022. We're not sure what's going to happen in 2021 yet, but by God, I hope that we can be playing the Hoop Shoot again in 2022.
Jen, there's no plans to have I know you've canceled most of the Hoop Shoot, but I saw a note that there could be a shoot off or something coming up in April.
So for the 2021 year, this new year, we're wrapping things up at the district level, and we're telling states that at their discretion, they can have state contests if they want to. There will be no regional or national finals for this season. The 2020 season, we are viewing right now as suspended. At this point, we have 24 national finalists from the 4 completed regions, and we have 198 regional finalists from the 8 regional contests that we had to cancel. So we're down to the math, and whatever that math is, around 230 kids left in that contest, and we are down to only 9 contests that have to happen. So what we're doing now is we want to make a decision by the end of this calendar year whether we think we can move forward and resume that season in the spring. So we would hold the 8 regionals that were canceled, and then we would bring in the 72 national finalists and complete the 2020 season in 2021. We're hopeful that we can do that in person. If we decide we can't, then we are right now trying to come up with a plan that would allow us to finish that season virtually.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks, Jim.
Yep. And I know that there's the obvious question is like, why did we cancel the regional and national finals for 2021 this early? And the reason for that is, we know that if we were to move forward with the 2021 season as if with business as usual, we know that we would be moving forward with large numbers of lodges or districts on the sidelines because they can't participate. And we didn't want to do that. You know, we didn't want to hold a hoop shoot season. I mean, it'd be like holding a, you know, imagine having the Super Bowl in a year when half the football teams couldn't compete. You know what I mean? So it's, we knew the situation on the ground now. We don't know what it's going to look like in the spring, but we know now that there are lodges and districts that won't be able to participate. So that was our thinking. It's an incredibly difficult planning environment right now. And we feel like we made good decisions, but as I said, it's been difficult. We also have scholarship programs, and talking about that, you know, what our program that we're helping kids achieve their academic dreams, and we do that by helping them look forward, which this image here is from the very first Scholar Service trip to Manistee, Michigan in August of 2015, I think. And it's, to me, it's like they're looking out at the horizon, and I think it's a nice metaphor for how our scholars can focus on their future instead of the hardships that they had to endure to get where they are now. They have some more financial security thanks to our scholarships that allows them to focus on their education and keep looking forward. Nationally, the college graduation rate is 62% based on the latest available data. Our most valuable students graduate at a rate of 97%, and our legacy scholars at 91%. That tells you that, you know, that we're investing in good candidates, good scholarship recipients, but also that they're able to focus on their studies and get through school. Not everybody can do that. You know, we've tried to, I said that we've been trying to turn our scholars into champions of the order. And, you know, one of the things we've observed is that when we bring Elks scholars together, that they form an immediate bond. So we've been trying to develop the idea of our Elks scholars as a network. And we've made some pretty good strides. You'll hear, if you're lucky enough to hear any of our scholars at convention, or if you've been watching any of the video content that we've been putting out, some of the interviews with scholars, they'll talk about Elks family a lot. And that's an idea that, you know, that's a seed that we planted, maybe started planting around 10 years ago, but now it's become part of their lexicon because that's really how they view themselves. They view themselves as part of our group. And they're starting to see themselves as future members of the Elks. That's not something, if we learned anything from, say, the first 80 years of our operation at the foundation, it's that our scholars aren't going to join the Elks simply because we gave them scholarship money. You know, for one thing, we're not the only organization giving them scholarship money. You gotta work at it. And if you guys are doing your own scholarships in Washington, it's worth thinking about. I mean, first and foremost, you're helping kids go to school, and that's important. That's paramount. But, you know, as Elks, as an organization that's been fighting membership for a long time, you know, we need to be a little selfish in our philanthropy, and we need to be thinking about how, you know, how can we develop our programs and align our programs with the goals of the association side of it, so that, you know, we're doing good things. We're doing the charitable things that Elks do, but we're doing things that are also going to help our organization. And that's what we've been trying to do for the past 10 years with our scholarship program. This slide here talks a little bit about that. We've been offering service opportunities through our service trips. We also require for legacy scholars, which are children and grandchildren of Elks, we require them each year to perform service with a local Elks Lodge before we'll renew their scholarship the next year. And we're kicking around this, you know, the idea of doing the same thing with most valuable students. But we've been doing it for a few years with legacy scholars. We're trying to develop this network. And then professional development opportunities, a lot of things that, you know, just the opportunity to go speak at an Elks Lodge, for example, is good experience. It's good opportunities for our scholars. But, you know, we've tried also to, and I know that we're talking to Ben Braden and others in your state about trying to get some of our scholars to help with some, I think, your IT committee, some of the things it was doing. I mean, those are good resume builders for Elks. You know, like we shouldn't be shy about offering these opportunities because we're offering something of value to our scholars, right? And we're getting something out of it too. That's okay, but they're getting you know, resume builders, important experience, and networking opportunities. You know, I can remember in 2018 in San Antonio, we brought 150 Elks scholars to San Antonio to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Elks. I've been going to a lot of conventions. I've been going to conventions since 1992, and then that was my favorite moment at any convention when, you know, we flooded the auditorium at opening ceremonies with those scholars when they came in there marching to music and stuff. It was just so great. But earlier in the day in the exhibit hall, we had like a side-by-side service with Elks. We had our Elks scholars and Elks coming through and assembling kits for homeless veterans. And one of our top scholars from, I think, 2014, or she was a top 20 scholar, was going through the line next to an elk from Oregon, and her major sort of aligned with the major project of the Oregon Elks. And by the time they were at the end of that line assembling these kits, she had herself an internship for the summer working at a camp or something that the Elks ran in Oregon. So it's just, you know, like we have a lot to offer them, they have a lot to offer us, and we just can't leave it to chance. We have to keep, again, going back to the volleyball analogy, we need to keep setting up these opportunities and then hoping that the Elks can spike them. I said that, you know, even just by fundraising, doing the things that we do at the Elks National Foundation, hope that can help with membership. And this is a really busy slide. I'll try to explain it. So what we do, we've been actually going back as far as 2004, we've been looking at this data, and it's the same pattern. We take the lodges and we put them into 4 groups based on the percentage of members in each lodge that supports the foundation. So the blue line in each year is lodges where it's less than or equal to 2.5% of the membership. Red is 2.5 to 7.5, green is 7.5 to 15%, and then purple is more than 15%. And every single year, and then we look at the total population of that group of lodges, membership population, and plot the membership change compared to the next year. Every single year we've studied, and going all the way back further than this chart to 2004 or 5, that purple group, where lodges where more than 15% supports the foundation, has had the best membership results. And for the past 4 years, that group has grown. Now, you know, I'm not saying this is a causation argument that you know, if people donate in your lodge, your lodge is going to grow in membership. But there seems to be a correlation, and there could be a lot of reasons for that. It could be that lodges where a lot of members are donating are better lodges. But I think at least part of it is because when you have members who understand the work that the foundation is doing, they're going to see value in their membership card. So even if they're not coming out to the weekly dinner that you now have every Wednesday night at your lodge, or they're not participating anymore in their activities, they still see value. So when their dues notice comes around and they're making a decision about spending their limited disposable income on your dues, they see value to it, and they're more likely to re-up. So that's our theory, and the numbers bear it out. Now, we talk a lot about that 15% number. We recently made it a few years ago. We added a $500 bonus to our gratitude grant for lodges in which more than 15% of the members support the foundation. That obviously helps the foundation, but that's 15% is a magic number because of that chart. That's why we did that. It was that chart that it showed you. We've made getting to the 15% mark a priority since 2010. And we've made slow but steady progress. Every now and then we took a step back, but this recently completed fiscal year, we got to almost there, 14.93%. If we rounded, it would say 15%. So we're almost there. And based on the data, that should translate into better membership numbers for the Elks. We also talk a lot about our Fidelity Club, which is our monthly giving program. The reason we do that is renewal rates. This chart here, this goes back 5 years, and it looks at donors in the previous year who gave 1 gift all the way up to 8 or more gifts, and then what their renewal rate was the next year. 1 gift donors consistently have been just around 50%, 54% last year, call it. So about 1 out of every 2 people who gave us 1 gift last year won't renew this year. If you can get a second gift, it climbs to around 70%. Third gift, it's over 80%. 8 or more, it's 95% renewal rates. I used to belong to a gym, and the last year I belonged to it, I had an auto payment. The last year I belonged to it, I only went once, but I still paid. People do it and they kind of forget about it. We don't want them to forget about it, but it just people sign up for these monthly payments. I know that Rick Athan is trying to push this as a monthly billing as a way to pay our dues. I think it's a really smart idea. It's also a way that people can give maybe a little bit more generously in a budget-friendly way. Not everybody can write a big check all at once, but through a monthly gift, you can give a little bit less, maybe something, and our minimum is, $5 a month, which most people, I think, can figure out a way to find $5 in their monthly budget to donate to a charity they believe in. And then this slide here is this is one of our internal slides, and our fundraising team doesn't like it when I want to show it, but I think it's a great slide to show. And it looks at long-term value, and that's a fundraising metric where you take the average gift and you divide it by the lapsation rate, and that gives you what somebody's long-term value is to the organization. And for the blue line here is just our average donor, right? Pick one donor out, the average donor, and the value is somewhere around $125 or so. Long-term value, right? Our Fidelity Club donors, because they tend to give a little bit more, and because their lapsation rates are so low, their average value is $3,600. Long-term value is $3,600. So it's a smart way for us to spend our limited resources promoting this program. It's also a smart way, a smart area for fundraising chairs among your group to focus, because you can make your job a lot easier if you secure some of these Fidelity Club donors, because you don't have to work hard to renew them. They're probably going to give more. And it helps your state too, because our state grants are based on giving, right? So you have more of these Fidelity Club donors means more money coming in for Washington, which means Washington gets a bigger slice of the grant pool pie that we allocate each year. The last thing we try to do is just tell the stories of the good work the Elks are doing. And these aren't always stories about the ENF. Like, we've been talking a lot about what some of your lodges are doing to battle, or were doing last month, to help people who were victimized by the fires. And I think there was a couple lodges in Oregon. I think there was a Washington lodge also that we wrote about. They weren't necessarily using ENF grant money to do it, but it was a cool story, and we wanted to amplify that story. And so we shared it out in our social media channels. If you're not familiar with what we're doing on social media, go to enf.elks.org/social. that'll take you to one of our pages. We're on all the channels, Facebook, Twitter. Our YouTube channel is super active. We have a blog. I wrote, in the early days of the pandemic, I did a series of articles about ways that lodges were trying to stay relevant safely during the pandemic. And I featured Ballard Lodge, 827, in one of those stories. We're on Instagram. Our podcast has been dormant because we haven't figured out a way to record since the pandemic started. But prior to that, we recorded more than 60 episodes, and we have an e-newsletter also. We have a few e-newsletters as well. So great ways to keep in touch with, keep your finger on the pulse of the Elks National Foundation. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, I would encourage you to do that. You can go to enf.elks.org/YouTube. That'll take you right to our channel. We just have, lately our approach has been, we've been putting out Zoom shows that we've been doing. I've been doing a bi-weekly show with our assistant director, Debbie Doles, who I believe was out, who actually got to speak to you guys in person a couple of years ago, back when that was a thing. We have a show called 20 for 20, which has been coming out every week, and it's a sit-down interview with one of our top 20 most valuable students. Each episode is anywhere from 8 to 15 minutes, and it's just you get a more complete picture of who those kids are. I won't promise that you're always going to share the same passions as them, but I will promise that you will always be impressed with them. And then we just started a monthly show on the hoop shoot, and it's similar. They're going to be talking to former hoop shoot participants, and the first one aired on October 6th, and McKenna Cannon, who coordinates the hoop shoot for us, interviewed Madigan Moore, who is a 2006 national finalist from South Dakota, and caught up with her. And I can talk and tell you the benefits of the hoop shoot, right? But it means a lot more when you hear it from somebody who actually did it and has some perspective, so they understand the lessons that they learned. And they're worth checking out. Go check out our YouTube channel. It's easy to fall down the rabbit hole. There's just a ton of stuff there. But if you subscribe, you'll be notified when a new thing comes out, and watch our stuff. And it really, all the shows that we're doing and the content we're putting out there are designed just to make you feel good about the Elks, about being an Elk. And it's super easy to share that stuff on your social media. A great way to introduce other people to the Elks. We do everything I've been talking about with, it might seem like a large staff, given some of the size of some of the other departments around headquarters. We have 19 people organized into 4 departments. But you saw that pie chart earlier about how much we spend on our admin and fundraising expenses. So we do a lot with a little. And that's it. This is my behind the shield phone number right there. So you ever want to talk to me, my email address, without going through the gatekeepers, they're right there. And that is my formal presentation.
Thank you, Jim. I asked him the same thing I asked a lot of the folks, and that was, I would really like to have it just be so casual that you feel like you've made a connection that you maybe wouldn't get when you went to Grand, because there's so many people around. But let's just act like we're down in the social quarters and sitting down at a table and have a conversation. So, anyway, thank you very much. And I'm sure someone along the way has already thanked you for all the extra monies that you gave out this year from ENF. And we all feel really, really supported by you all. So I'm going to shut up now. You guys have questions.
Well, Jim, I've got one, and I'm asking quite a bit in Washington and my other states. And you don't need to give the exact percentages, but the question always comes up is, how did the Elks National Foundation figure the amount of money to be given to each state every year? And I know the formula is quite extensive, but you could just recap that just a little bit.
Okay, so we have three. Well, we have two formulas that we use. One is it's 30, 65, 5% formula with 30%. So we have a grant pool, right? And let's say it's $4 million. And we use this for our state charities grant and our bonus grant. 60 or 30% of that fund is going to be allocated among the states based on cumulative giving to the foundation. So since 1928, when we were formed, what has Washington given as a percentage of all the money that we've received? That percentage multiplied by 30% of the grant pool. Okay, that's one piece. 65 is the second piece, and that's going to be based on the prior year. So our 2020 fiscal year that we just wrapped up. What did Washington give relative to the other states multiplied by that 65% of that pool? That's the second piece. And the third piece, which is 5%, is bequests last year. Bequests can be really large sometimes, and they can be really swingy in the formula. So we've capped that at 5% of the pool to prevent really large swings that would have a great impact on the state that had the large bequest, but a negative impact on all the ones that didn't. So, all right, so 30, 65, 5. The second formula we use, which is for this, what we call the special projects grant, which is the third of the 3 state grants that we award every year, is simpler. It's strictly based on cumulative giving. And it's what did Washington give since 1928? You know, just like the first part of the other formula, but it's only that. So the entire grant pool is going to be allocated based on your percentage of giving versus the entire organization. And then as far as the size of the pool, that is a decision that the trustees would make at our budget meeting every year. We've tried to increase the size of the pool every year. Sometimes there's been some years when we've increased that pool by 5%. Typically, it's usually around 3% that we'll increase it. It'll depend on the whole picture of the budget. It's budgeting for us it's a zero sum, right? We know what the revenue is going to be, and now we're allocating it among all these different things that we're doing. So, there are some years where we're making pretty big changes to some of the programs, and when that happens, the state grant pool will tend to be more like 3%, the increase. There are other years where we're kind of standing pat with our programs. There aren't as many big new initiatives. And when that happens, we'll tend to see, the state grants, the increase to the pool might be closer to 5%.
Very good, Jim.
Anybody else?
Pretty quiet group today.
Yeah, they are.
I'm sure that's because I did such a thorough job of explaining everything.
You did.
That
You
nobody
did a
has any
great
questions.
job.
Excellent.
Good job.
Thank you.
Jim, San Antonio really left me with some great feelings. I was, of all things, standing in line, I guess for food. Well, I suppose for food. I think it was before Gary Sinise came out.
Yeah.
And there was a guy in line in front of me, and he was obviously an Elks scholar. And I said hello to him, and congratulations. And this guy had more grit and more maturity. So I asked him, so he looked really young, are you going in now like as a freshman, or where are you at? And he goes, oh, I'm in med school. And you're like, wow, that's pretty incredible.
So we've worked really hard, as I was saying earlier, to, we want to be more than just a check to our scholarship recipients, because we're not the only organization giving them checks. And we want the relationship to extend beyond their 4 years of college. So, you know, a few years ago, we got a very generous bequest from a donor in Florida that was earmarked to establish a medical school scholarship for Elks scholars only. And that's been one of the tools that we've been able to develop to help us extend the relationship. So that person might have been a Weigel scholar, or maybe not. But you know, it's either way. We've been coming up with ways to keep these students engaged. We actually, a few years ago, we created a position on our staff that we call Elks Scholar Fellow, and we hire a graduate to come work for us for 2 years, limited term, and they coordinate certain aspects of our scholarship program. But it's, you know, we're now on our 4th fellow, I think, that we've had. But it's just another thing, another way to keep people engaged. That's only one person, but you get more people applying, and it's just, you know, and we get such great stories from the applications for the fellow, the applications for the Weigel Award, the applications from our service trips, that are stories that we can share and just continue the relationship with our scholars. So we actually had one of my colleagues is vacationing in Napa right now. I guess Napa's on fire, so it's cheap there, I guess. So so she's there, but one of our Elks scholars, a top scholarship winner from 2003, we have a great relationship with him. And he's currently between jobs, so he went out and met my colleague and her husband for lunch. So it's just an example of how we've been able to develop some of these relationships, and how our scholars more and more are viewing themselves as part of this thing that we've been building for 152 years.
All about mentoring.
Oh.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Oh, I don't have a question, but I do really want to thank everybody at the ENF for what they've done for this MVS program. You know, we're coming up. I'm really looking forward to the state chair. The district chairs are more enthused this year because of the new way we're doing it, minus ISTS and all that. And it really, just the fact that you're dealing through the elks.org backbone is really got a lot of people, even at the lodge levels, excited. They just feel better doing it this way. And so,
you know, we try to listen to feedback, and certainly we got an earful of feedback after the first year with ISTS, and we preached patience. And in the second year, it got better, right? We made some changes based on feedback. They were more familiar with us. And then year 3 rolled around, and I can remember, like, when we debriefed the competition with them at the end of the first year, they were saying, just wait till year 3, it'll be great by then, it'll be fine. And then year 3, there was just a series of missteps, and it was all them shooting themselves in the foot, and it just creating a horrible experience for our volunteers, which is the last thing we want to do. Like, ISTS did a wonderful job of addressing the concern we had for our clients. Again, paramount is the service we're providing to our scholars, right? We addressed a weakness and made it better immediately. But on the back end, and the experience for our volunteers, which is also important, wasn't good. And it got better, and then it got worse. And we decided at the end of the 3rd year, that was it. 4th year, it was because we needed time to develop what you all will be exposed to soon. And man, my fingers are crossed, but it was, you know, it was designed by, the new judging platform was designed by people who work for the Elks and know the Elks. They've designed other platforms, like, you know, anybody who's ever applied for a CIP application, these are the same people who developed the scholarship judging platform. So we're optimistic that it's going to be a much better year.
Good. Anybody else? Well, Jim, we do thank you. We
Thanks for having
appreciate,
me.
well, yeah, and it's very informative what you shared today. It is indeed being recorded, And so all of those webinars, seminars that we've done will be available like sometime it's Thursday. Next week, they'll be available online so that everybody can view those. So we appreciate everything. I'm sure all of us feel that same way with what you've been able to do.
Well, yeah, thank you for the invitation. If anybody has a question that they think of later, feel free to shoot me an email.
All right.
Appreciate you coming.
Yep.
Thanks,
for having
Jim.
me. Yep.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
guys.
much.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Jim.
Aren't we going to do one of these?
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Hi, Diane.
Bye.
Oh.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm back to work. I'm so excited.
Oh, is that a big smile? Wow.
It